This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Welcome to the Living It Out podcast. My name is Kelly Pagel, and with me is Seth Oswald. Seth,
hi.
Always good to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for letting me be here.
Absolutely. And we are in a new series this week called Ready Player One.
Yes.
And I thought it was a really good message.
It was very good.
Yeah, really challenging.
A lot of fun.
So I'm looking forward to unpacking that a little bit with you today. And we are really talking about this balance between tech and our digital kind of life and our faith life. And have you ever given that much consideration?
A little bit. I don't know if I've really ever thought about it. I just know that tech is a great thing. It's a great tool to have. And for me, when it comes to like looking at tech and faith life, like there are some things that it really does help me with in my faith life. Like you can download the free Bible app, which is pretty cool.
That
so
is
you have
cool.
a Bible everywhere you go. And I'm one of those people that gets like anxiety if I don't have my phone
Okay.
when I leave.
Yeah.
So, that's very helpful, and it's helped me stay connected with people and through community and all those wonderful things. But I've never like looked at like, oh, what's my tech faith relationship? Until really, I think maybe this weekend it came up. Yeah,
it's an interesting concept. And so, listeners, if you aren't quite sure what we're talking about, please go back, listen to that message, and then you can come back here and as we unpack all of this. But really considering our tech life and our faith life and what impact tech has on our life and how it can be positive and negative at the same time, right? I mean, there are a lot of times where I really like to have, like maps on my phone.
Yeah.
I've considered going to a dumb phone, right? And I'm like, but maps, and a lot of other things too, but just those handy times that having the internet right there is a good thing.
It's super convenient.
Yeah, it is. And yet it is so easy to let it kind of creep as well.
Yep. Get out of hand a little bit,
Yep.
scroll mindlessly for a while.
Yeah, and look up and, oh, wow, that was 30 minutes.
Yep.
So, So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So if you want to just give our listeners a quick summary of the message from this past weekend, just so we're all starting from sort of the same spot, and then we'll dive in.
It's great. Yeah, so Ben talked about DTR, so determining the relationship that you have really with tech. And some of the things he talks about is getting honest, clarify intentions, and consider your future. And so those are some of the DTR things, which was really, really good. And he broke down a couple different pieces of scripture.
Yeah.
And he's talked about in Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
A group of people who used, in a way, technology to build, to use bricks instead of stone to help build a big, big tower. And like that was just like advanced technology in that day. And then he also talked a little bit about in 2 Chronicles, King Uzziah, which is amazing because I think he became king when he was like 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
Or like 16 years old. It
Young.
was something very young. But anyways, very successful in what he did and helped really grow his army, his city, his people, the trust, but pride crept in. And so he talks about a little bit about pride, using Uzziah's story and how that was the fall of him. And then we got into James a little bit about loving the world or not loving the world and being humble and not prideful. And so it was wonderful. Great scripture, a lot of scripture, really good stuff for those of you that like to dive in the Bible, learn a little bit more. Like this was a really good weekend for that.
Yes, absolutely.
But he really just talked about tech life and how we have struggled with this throughout really our whole lives. You look back at Tower of Babel and how we use the biblical story, but even today, how we do this. And I love how he did some generational picking, some poking,
yes.
where he was like, oh, well, when I was a kid, we didn't have smartphones. And then he shows a picture of being around a TV, like the big box TV, not the flat screens that we have today. And then even before that, newspapers, and then obviously the Tower of Babel. But it was a great message. It was very challenging. It was very encouraging at the same time to really determine the relationship that you have with tech.
Yeah.
So,
Getting honest, I think, is such a great first step of where are we at. I mentioned it earlier, but it's so easy for me personally, and so I imagine that resonates with some of you listeners as well. Like to lose our time of just being kind of sucked in to tech, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's social media or on the news, or it can look different for different people, shows, but being really honest about what that is for you and what hold it has on you. I thought that was such a great starting place.
Yeah, very good. I don't know about you, Kelly, but I know for me, like, it is something that definitely I have to keep in the forefront all the time. I need accountability with it.
Yes.
Like, it's so easy for me just to pick up my phone and want to look at it.
Yeah.
Or scroll through it or play a game on it, which I'm very, very good at doing.
Yes.
Playing a game
Yeah.
on it. And it's tough, but like being honest about really what's going on, how often do I use my tech? It can be scary. And I know Ben did mention a little bit, like there's these things, at least Apple, I'm sure Android probably has this.
I think so, yeah.
Like the screen time, and you can see how much screen time that you're spending on what apps, on what
Right.
part of your phone and device, like breaks it down minute by minute, hour by hour. And that can be daunting.
It can. It can. Yeah. Especially when, Apple anyway sends the little report of how many hours you've been on your phone. And I there are times where I'm like, what? No, I'm averaging what? Now I use it a lot for work. We tend to use it a lot for communicating here at work. And if you're listening to a podcast or watching, videos, even if they're educational, that all counts. So, sometimes that bumps my numbers up a little bit, but it is really that awareness. So I'm thankful. I don't always love the number that comes back, but I'm thankful for that they do share that information, or that it's available. And so if you don't have that turned on your phone, that might be a way to start that getting honest process.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yep, and it's awesome. And, I know Ben ended up, too, talking a little bit about just like some of the ways that we can do that, like of trying to keep ourselves off our device by, if, you find yourself on social media mindlessly scrolling like I do at times, too, it's like logging out of those apps.
Yeah.
Setting your screen times. There are ways where you can actually like set a certain app or whatever you're on your phone. You can set time limits. You can create a password. So if there is somebody in your life that you're accountable to, or you have accountability with, like they could set up a password on your phone and set the limit that you guys, you come to an agreement. And then once it's done, you're locked out for, I don't know if it's like just a day or 24 hours or whatever.
I think it's 24 hours. Yeah, we had that had set that up on my iPad that my kids used when they were younger. We all shared devices, and for a while there was a lot of YouTube use going on, and so we would set time limits. And I haven't stopped it. And so now I'll get that. You have 5 minutes left on YouTube. And I'm like, I haven't been on YouTube in weeks. I'm like, oh, okay, someone else has been using my device. And it's fine, but it's really interesting, to have those little messages pop up, and they catch me, even though, I'm like, I haven't been on YouTube all day, but it is a good reminder. And so I'm sure that regardless of whether you're Apple or Android, or that you're going to be able to have those tools available. So yeah, really good. And, as I was listening to you kind of recap the scripture, and you gave such a great synopsis of what happened in each of those, and both times, and it was kind of mirrored too down in James, that there's a pride component that fell in, at least with the two stories that Ben shared from the Old Testament, that I hadn't captured that before. But the pride piece of with the Tower of Babel, that's why God put a stop to it. And same with the other. So I think that's also a good check for us.
Big time. The story of Babel, the Tower of Babel, with them figuring out, using the technology that they did to make brick, to build a taller tower, which is going to be much more sturdier than stone, which we talked a little bit about. Ben talks about it and teaches it really great. And this is just it's a great, actually, side note. The way that he shared this story using this topic, it was very unique. It's very good. I've never even thought or heard about like the fresh story of Tower of Babel like this, using the technology, being here now in 2024. Anyways, long story short, they build the tower and they get super prideful because, they had good intentions. They wanted to have good intentions to build the tower to get up closer to God. And then eventually, as they got up there, they realized, like, man, we don't need God.
Right.
We don't need God. Look at what we created. Look at what we did, and it became not God focused anymore. It became me focused internally, and then it became this like, well, great, look at us, look at what we can accomplish. So why would we be in the need of God? And God came in and he wiped out the tower.
Yeah, by changing their languages.
Changing their languages and spreading them all around. And that's why it's called Babel, because they started all speaking different languages. They didn't understand each other. And that's really where we get the languages, today. And he said, I think was it modern day Iraq? Babylon? So it was modern day Iraq here, what we know as Iraq today, or Iran, one of the two. It's so true. I mean, technology can easily do that. It's very, very so much me focused.
Yeah. Yeah.
Social
if we're not mindful.
Media.
I hadn't thought about that. That's good.
Seriously, you got social media.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I have an iPhone, so like it's all like Seth. I can break it down the way I want it to be broken down and use it the way I want it to be used, and it's easy, and it's very, very easy to do that. And then the pride that creeps in that way of myself, but also even like speaking of social media and other things, like the device that I have, everything right at my fingertips, like it's very easy to also see what other people are doing. And to get prideful in a way of like, oh, I don't do that, or it's not as bad. But also the pride of comparison.
Yeah, the pride of,
things that can also creep in, not just pride, but comparison, all that other stuff.
all the
which is
things.
rooted in that, all the things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways, and that's and that's so good with technology. Like you think about the way it was created was to help advance. It's to help make a little bit more, probably life a little easier,
Right.
convenient in a way. And so how easy is that, at least for myself, I can see myself slipping into like, well, I don't need God. My life's easy. It's comforting.
Yeah.
So comfortable.
Yeah. Right.
And
right.
so anyways, it was very good. It was
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah. And talking about easy and comfortable, he brought in the analogy both of Brave New World, which I don't know if you've read it.
I have not.
And I got through part of it. My son was reading it in school, and they for whatever reason, they stopped reading it. But I started it, and I'm like, whoa, this is something. So if you've read it, you probably remember the story. But the other story he drew in was WALL-E, the story, and that was good. That was great. It's a Pixar.
Yeah,
I think it's
Disney,
Pixar,
Pixar.
Some one of those. And the idea that they were up on this spaceship, and when you look at it and consider that that's when the iPhone came out, which I didn't. That was an interesting connection and parallel. I didn't know. Boy, it really does make you stop and think that. Where are we headed if we're not mindful about it? Because technology is also wonderful. I mean, I love technology. I'm able to communicate with my relatives that live over in Thailand, and those types of things. I remember even my grandpa was pretty cool, and he had an iPhone, and he FaceTimed. Like I'm FaceTiming my 97-year-old grandfather. Like, how cool is that, right? Those opportunities that it offers, you have to balance that with the potential. And so going back to the DTR of determining the relationship is so important, and letting that be kind of a guide so that we don't land in Wally World.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Wally Space.
Wally Space, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. So
It's true.
yeah. Yeah. So as you listen to this, was there anything in particular that you were really challenged by that has made you, as we've come out of the weekend and into the week, that you're still thinking about?
Yeah, it's the determining the relationship. So me just having to have that on the forefront for me personally, and setting it aside, my device or my technology of some sort or whatever, being able to limit screen time. Yes, having it on my device helps, but really even doing that on the outside of having not my device, but like just mentally, like putting that in the forefront, like I need to determine the relationship. And so always going back to that. And then even just Ben's bottom line, where he said technology can lead us to know God, or to like know God at all. Like we don't need God, right? That pride that we just talked about, and breaking down Tower of Babel and Uzziah's story. And for me, I think that's where it's just like, what am I using my device for?
Yeah.
So it comes down to that: determine your relationship. What am I using my device for?
great.
Is it me focused? I could easily justify me focus. I can easily justify it's for others too. But then it's like, well, at what expense is, like, what else is suffering?
That's
from my
good.
advice? So like, what other relationships are suffering? Are they the ones that are in front of me, like being a pastor at a church? Are they my wife? Is it my 2 young boys? Is it, and so like, am I more focused on me and my device, or am I more focused on the people that God put in front of me? And so really just determining that relationship was my biggest takeaway when it came to Ben's message.
Yeah, that's great.
How about you?
That's great. Yeah, I think definitely that framework was really powerful, and just that reminder of setting limits so that my human relationships, my family relationships, my friends don't suffer because of how I'm interacting with technology. I was listening to, I think it was a podcast, may have been in a book, but that even when you have a phone and you turn it over, like if we were to be having a conversation and our phones would be on the table but turned over, right? Which is basically saying, I'm focusing on you, or that's the intention generally when people do this, that apparently from research that's been done, that we would have interacted differently had our phones been out than with our phones gone.
Totally.
So I thought that was really intriguing, that even when they're face down, if they're present, the other person is sensing that you're waiting for something and you're not 100% engaged with them. So I was really challenged by that as it related to everything that Ben spoke about, and just how it all fits together.
Sure.
And so I've done some different, listened to some different podcasts and things on this sort of topic. And so it was just, what Ben offered, and was just great to think about that in the realm of everything else.
It's great.
Yeah.
It really is.
Because it's easy to get taken over.
Sure.
It really is. And I don't even know that, it's not intentional that I'm going to go spend my time doing X instead of Y, stare at whatever instead of interacting with my family, but it's
Absolutely.
so easy to happen. So,
it is, and that's what they're made for, right?
Right.
That's try to get us to
literally, and that's not necessarily wasn't new information to me, but it's always a good reminder because it leaves that many of the apps and things that we interact with were designed to distract us.
Absolutely.
To pull our attention away, and so I think really being mindful of their purpose, and then, we have to back up and say, well, what's our purpose and how are we going to use them as a tool rather than them using us? So,
that was very good too.
Yeah. That was kind of a funny line.
Don't be a tool, and it's so true.
It is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how
so
they make their money.
Exactly.
And it's designed, and so it's a dopamine rush, and I'm a dopamine junkie.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Well, that's kind of human
It's
nature,
just a human thing. It's part of it.
It is.
And that's what, devices do, is to draw our attention. And so, setting those boundaries in place they're huge.
Yep.
They're huge.
Yep. So do you have any next steps for our listeners as we go in? We have one more week within this series. And so as we live this out, what are some next steps that you have?
I think if you find yourself, you got to determine your relationship, first of all, with tech, do a tech audit, set those healthy boundaries that you and I just talked about.
Yeah.
I love that question Ben opened up with, like, what gets your first and last attention? Maybe not open up with, but it was towards the end of his message. But what gets your first and last attention? Is it when you wake up, you go right to your phone? Is it when you go back to bed, you're scrolling and you put your phone away, whatever that is, and you're like, I know for me it's tough because I'm like, well, I use my phone for my alarm clock, and somebody said to me, which is I didn't want to hear, I needed to hear. They said, go buy an alarm clock, and I said, gosh, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
I want to punch you, but you're right.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
and it's something as simple as that.
So
being able to charge my phone in a different room where it's not even by the bed, but maybe it's just going and getting an alarm clock. So what gets your first and last attention? He said some next steps, some practical ones were logging out of social media apps to help require you to log in if you can't remember your password and stuff like that. So it just makes it a little bit more of like a setback of do I really want to log in?
You really have to make a conscientious choice there.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we talked about too, which it's funny because we're talking about technology, but we're really encouraging you to get our app.
Right.
Download our app.
Well, and that, that goes back to using your device or your technology to know God.
Yep.
And so looking at how are you using it, and if you're like, well, I want to be able to interact with material that's going to grow my faith, that's an option.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
You're absolutely right. And there's a lot of great things on there, the daily, the podcast, some other resources to help you know God more. Our kids team
Have
just created a technology with kids and family. And if you're anything like me, it's a parent too, like it's a little scary. I got two small boys, like I shared. And like, yeah, these are conversations my wife and I are having, Sam, all the time. Like, and we have a 3 and an almost 2-year-old. And we're still having these conversations. Like, what is this going to look like? And so in our app, there is a great resource for those of you that are parents, or going to be parents, or maybe you're a grandparent, or you have influence over the next generation of some sort. There is a great resource for you in all ages and stages of life with kids of how to navigate those conversations, navigate this faith tech, boundaries, and all these wonderful things that and it's a free resource for you.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to check that out.
Yeah, that's great.
And those of you that don't have parents, or not parents, kids, for those of you that are not parents, or you don't have kids, like the app is still a great resource for you no matter what, like we've said, to know God. So.
Yeah, that's just all the kid and student resources there are just one piece of it. So
it's one piece. Yeah.
Yeah. But, well, thank you. I really appreciate you
Thanks,
being
Kelly.
here. Yeah,
Thanks.
it's always
It's great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. It's always fun to talk to you and to gain your insights. And listeners, we hope that this is a time that has reminded you that you matter and helps you to live out the message as you go through your week. So thank you for spending your afternoon or morning with us.